Welcome to Illusion HorrorCon 2025. You are about to hear a recorded panel discussion featuring game designers, writers, and community members from across the tabletop role-playing space. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during these panels are those of the individual panelists and moderators and do not necessarily reflect the views of Illusion Horror and Con, its organizers, sponsors, or partners. These discussions may include mature themes, critical perspectives, and personal experiences related to tabletop role-playing games, horror, and creative work. Listener discretion is advised. Panel topics are intentionally open to the attendees' interpretation. Our moderator and panelists are encouraged to explore the subject freely, share their own experiences, and engage in thoughtful discussion. Time has also been set aside for audience questions and contributions. This recording is part of the Illusion HorrorCon 2025 Untethered Realities. For more information about the convention, upcoming and past events, please visit our website or join us on Discord. And now, let's begin the panel.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending upon where you are in the world and watching this. I think we're covering a few time zones as a panel here. Thank you, Rachel, for staying up so late. Welcome to I think this is the first panel for Saturday. I forget time zones and things, but yeah. Hi, I'm David. We're going to be talking about horror in one-shots versus campaigns today. I shall be your guide, your lead, your shut up, let someone else talk kind of person. And I'm joined by these wonderful people. We'll go around, give yourself a quick introduction, say who you are, where people can find you and all that kind of stuff. We'll go how I see you on my screen. And we'll start over here on my screen, which is Gunilla.
Hello, I'm Gunilla Jonsson. I've written role-playing games since the 80s, most notably in English, the horror game Cult. And I've also written a lot of mainly convention scenarios, one-shots, and long campaigns. So I think I've got some idea of how to work with both. That's me.
Next on my screen is Michael.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm Gunilla's partner. We are actually sitting next to each other here. If some things in the background looks familiar, that's because that. As Gunilla said, we started writing role-playing games in the 80s. Published the first game in 84. We wrote Cult. These days we are writing for Cult Divinity Lost, Troubleshooters, Dragonbane, and we also written 3 horror novels. And just as Gunilla, I have worked with both short scenarios and long campaigns. So hopefully we have something nice and thoughtful to say about this.
Awesome. I'm sure you will. Next, we'll go to John.
I'm John Hedge. I'm far less impressive than Gunilla and Michael. I am the backstage manager over the Miskatonic Playhouse, where we run actual play podcasts for Call of Cthulhu 7e content. Me and my partner, T A Newman, run short, long, everything in between. And I'm really excited to come in and chat about this in general, because right now I am presently running a campaign. And so as someone who's run mostly one-shots and shorter stuff, switching up to campaign mode and thinking about all these things is quite exciting for me. So I'm looking to simmer in all the great advice we have today.
Awesome. And then Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel. I am a little starstruck right now because I didn't realize who I was going to be on a panel with. Cult's an amazing game. Wow, hi, great to meet you. So you can find me pretty much everywhere on the internet as Stolen Fires, including a very tiny Twitch channel where I do a lot of I try to focus on independent gaming. Right now we've got Dune, Prowlers and Paragons, and Heart. I'm trying to work up a Call of Cthulhu campaign, maybe Dracula Dossier. Haven't decided yet, but hi. I've done writing and editing and community content for By Night Studios. I've done some stuff for Miskatonic Repository, for Storyteller's Vault. So, hi.
And last but not least, T A Newman.
Very much least, David. Come on, we all know it. Lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And again, much like Rachel, every year I come into these things and go, wow, look at all these amazing, talented people who have done amazing things. I've, as Hedge said, worked with Hedge. He's one of the partners with the Miskatonic Playhouse, where we run actual play podcast for community content for Call of Cthulhu 7 Edition. Myself, I've written some scenarios, some of which lucky enough to have been gold bestsellers, which is for me a really quite an achievement. I'm really excited about that. But my place here, those scenarios are very much what you would go, aha, here's the scenarios are one shot, but then obviously sometimes they go longer. The big reason I'm here today as well is because my experience in campaigns is I once upon a time ran a big campaign, and we've turned it into a gigantic book, which is currently going through those very difficult processes of editing and making it that campaign that other people can run and play. So I'm kind of in that stepping stone place between having that final campaign published, but it will get there at some point when life allows. But very excited to be here and maybe even offer a thought or two.
Excellent. Nice to have everybody here. And I am David. I am part of Darker Days Radio, mostly for RPGs. That's where you'll find me. I'm also in Rachel's Stolen Fires, where when I was in the right time zone, I did run some games for her. But I've moved time zones, so that doesn't happen anymore. I have written for various things and struggle with making one shots and not turning them into more kind of like long play games. So we shall certainly dive into the difference between one shot, long play, and campaigns during this discussion. But first, I think we shall actually make a distinction. What is a one shot and what is a campaign? So, who wants to start first with what is a one shot? What do you mean by a one shot? Because I have certain ideas, but we'll let you lot discuss.
Do we just
jump in?
Talking?
Just jump in, Rachel.
For me, a one shot is there is one problem to solve. There might be a twist where the problem you think you're solving is different, but it's still the same problem.
So a one goal story.
I'm not.
Yeah, and like PCs might have their own goals, but as a group, you've got one problem.
Cool.
Not to define this as a thing, but just as a I suppose experiential idea of a one shot is Hedge and I and other of you out there. We're obviously online. Sometimes you run online. You might be running for a live audience. The idea of a one shot, if you're on Twitch and you're running it in an evening for people, that can really help you redefine your understanding of a one shot when you've got like a 4-hour slot and you're looking at a scenario. But I think that might be something that we talk about later. But yeah, I really like what Rachel's saying there about there's that one problem or investigation, or there's one encounter that you're building to, and that kind of seems to be the focus.
Yeah, and also that you're all on board with, we're going to play this for 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. We have a set timeline, so that gets the whole group to work together towards telling this story in this confined timeline.
I guess for me, a one-shot is basically just what the name says. It's supposed to be played in one session, often with pre-made characters, for us at least. For me, I guess the convention scenario is the most typical one-shot.
I think how I would I tend to think about it like a movie. A one-shot's a movie. And then campaigns, by their very nature, they're either episodic in terms of you're actually running a series of scenarios back to back, or you've also got the big campaigns where you're building to a big moment of some kind. So there's a lot of space in between about what each one is. But generally, a one shot is characterized by pre-gens, a predetermined problem to solve, limited scope. And you can sometimes put a lot of one shots together to create a campaign, that episodic feel. But I think we're probably going to be putting that concept aside, and we're going to be talking about the more epic style of campaign today because, well, that's probably just more interesting for all of us.
Yeah. I think I agree with all of you, although I'm very, very bad at keeping the time for a one shot. It's like, yeah, it's like cons are good because then you have to do it in that 4-hour period. But if you're just doing it with friends, it can run over quite some time. I think I ran what was meant to be a one shot for Rachel of this, and I think it turned into like 4 or 5 sessions.
I mean, also you were running for total scene chewers, so
yeah, yes, I was, but it was great. Cool. Okay, so Hedge brought up an interesting point there as well. I think one shots into campaign, so kind of the episodic idea. I think that is one way to do a campaign, just kind of story link some one shots together to make a campaign. But also, I think the correct, and what we'll probably talk about more today, is the idea of a ongoing story arc for a campaign. So, what for you then defines a campaign? So, there's also is it something that is set for 10 to 15 sessions? Do you count that as a campaign, or is a campaign something that can go on for specifically for you for years, as some people do? Is a 10 to 15 to 20 shot story arc a campaign, or is a decade long, if anybody ever has the patience to run those, campaign thoughts? So
I ran the Boy King campaign for Pendragon for, I think, 6 or 7 years.
More
Wow.
like 10 or 12, actually.
Yeah, it was a very long campaign with the basic structure of the campaign, and then a lot of small side stories. And we go to Ireland, and we go to the Orkneys, and well, so yeah. But that's the homegrown, you do it with friends campaign. You won't do that on a podcast, or certainly not on a con.
That's a commitment for a con. If you go, yes, we're going to do a con game and run the entire weekend. No one's allowed to sleep.
I could do that.
In MRCon this year, we had for the first time, we had someone, Jason, actually, wonderful friend of ours, and he ran a game, but he actually, in the background of things, we helped him orchestrate it so that over the entire con. But I think they had a great time doing it.
I have kind of a flip answer. You know you're running a campaign when someone asks you, what are you doing Wednesday next month? Oh, I've got a game.
If you're planning a month in advance, then you're doing well, and the players are turning up. That is definitely a campaign then.
Yeah, if you know, like, oh, okay, 4 Wednesdays from now, I know I'm going to be running this RPG for this group of people, you're in a campaign.
But also you have to plan very different when you're running a long-term campaign. I mean, I'm running a to the D20's Star Trek Adventure campaign at the moment for our old play group in Södertälje in Sweden. And you actually have to read the campaign, you have to read the background material, you have to watch Star Trek TV series and movies. It gets to be almost a lifestyle if you're actually running a long-term campaign. And our campaigns tend to be long, not as long as Gunilla's Pendragon campaign all the time, but at least a year or 2 is quite usual.
When we're not test playing campaigns written to be published, because I think that's quite a different animal. Publishers want you to have sizable but not too big campaign. And often they want this sort of serialized TV series mode in it as well. They want people to be able to cut it up in shorter sessions if they want to. And I think that's the most tricky part, writing a campaign for other people. You should be able to play it as Masks of Nyarlathotep and as a series of shorter adventures as well. And that's quite a feat to pull that off and make it good, I think.
One thing that might be worth pulling up here is the fact that since we're at a horror convention, you tend to see shorter games are much more common in horror because at the end of the day, characters die a lot in horror games in a way that they don't in epic heroic fantasy, which is why heroic fantasy is where you can see 6, 7, 8, 20-year campaigns. I guess it probably is doable. I mean, Masks is famously 1.5 years, 2 years long as a general rule. So it is, you can have a rotating cast as well as an overarching story. It can be done, but horror does tend towards shorter as a general rule.
You have to consider that you're writing the campaign, and we wrote the Call of Cthulhu campaign for Call of Cthulhu Sweden, the Swedish edition of Call of Cthulhu, and we made it such that the really horrible part where characters actually could die en masse came at the end at first. So it's also a commercial thing because people, at least in Sweden, they really don't want to roll up new characters every session. It's much better if you can actually play almost to the end, and I believe at least that you have to leave a way out. Unless they are really, really stupid or really, really aggressive, which is often the same thing, they could actually survive this if they're clever enough to run like hell whenever they see something dangerous.
Yeah, and I know that there's that idea of Michael Hedge was just saying there about the characters re-rolling characters, about the longevity of characters. But there is that idea that sometimes people say, oh, well, you have a character, have a backup character. But like Michael's saying, a lot of the time you don't want to do that because you invest in your character, you engage in your character. So perhaps with a campaign, we're looking at the idea that the horror has to be written slightly differently. Therefore, the actual campaign is a different type of horror because you can't drive everybody insane in the first scene unless it's a trick, unless it's a thing, or you can't just start killing people off within by the second chapter or second series of events or second, massive Nyarlathotep location, because you want that longevity, you want that slow feed experiences, but to be able to allow players to experience their character if they wanted to from start to finish. Obviously, it depends on their choices and their dice rolls, but that as an option, that creates a different type of horror.
Always blame the dice. So
I just built.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to build on that slightly, David. Sorry, I know you probably want to move on and talk about other things, but what I was going to say is when you're writing investigative horror, Call of Cthulhu, which is most of my background, a problem that you often have when writing shorter campaigns, shorter sessions, is you kind of need to make the mystery fairly obvious because they have to solve it. One of the very pleasant things about campaign writing with investigative mysteries is you can make it creepy and weird and difficult, and you can just let them not understand it for a long time, which from the perspective of players, puzzling it out is really enjoyable. They can take their time and they can really get to the bottom of what's going on. And you can just have bigger mysteries, which I think is really enjoyable to write and think and dream about. And that's that idea of it becoming part of your lifestyle. You can really get to grips with these things in a way that you can't really, if it's a one shot, you need to have some investigation. There needs to be a climax and they need to meet a horrible, grisly end. Like, the degree of complexity cannot be through the roof. So I think that's one thing that draws a lot of people to campaigns, but also makes them incredibly difficult.
Yeah, so we're talking here about the obviously this is a horror con. So we're talking about horror gaming. So in the one shots, we do tend to have this, even though we have a slow build of tension, you've got a small period of time where you have to build that tension up quickly. A campaign can run over multiple months, years, depending upon the system and the game that you're running and your players. And as we said, the dice rolls. How can you create that horror and tension over such a long game? Do you have horror and tension every single session? Is that would you do that, or would you and kind of keep it that kind of idea of a one shot, like build the tension up to a certain point and they go, "Ooh, stop the session. We'll deal with that next lesson." Or do you maybe have a couple of sessions which are downtime, just pure investigatory, and then at some point the tension builds up again?
So I've run the first half of both Masks of Nyarlathotep and Horror on the Orient Express, and then the groups fell apart for various reasons. But one thing I think that both of those campaigns do really well is that they keep you moving. So you're always visiting a different... Hi, sorry, my cat wants attention. So you're always moving from a city to a city. And so it was a really great moment for me as a keeper when I'm running Mask of Nyarlathotep and they're in, I forget the specific details, but they're in a nightclub and one of the players is like, "Oh, she's a cultist. Oh my God, they're all cultists. We're in a club full of cultists." It was just great watching that realization dawn on him. And then, pack up, we're going to the next city and the next wonderful horror to explore there.
Yeah, TA?
Yeah, so you mentioned there specifically about tension and suspense, and for me, that's one of the core aspects of. I suppose that leans into keeping as well as, but actually writing it within the campaign or within the scenario is and managing that across multiple sessions. I often think about it, and I've often communicated in the past. This is where I teach it in terms of when I teach as an actor, is like an elastic band. You've got to think about your audience, and you've got to, therefore your players in this respect, you've got to think about their experience of your tension and suspense. And with the elastic band theory, the idea is that elastic band's over your two thumbs, and bearing in mind I'm teaching this to small humans, so you'll have to forgive my patronizing here, but you kind of stretch that elastic band. So as you're building the tension, you're thinking about that elastic band, and then you hold them in suspense, and that's like a really good storytelling. But then if you keep stretching, they kind of get used to it. So you've got to release the tension, you've got to relax that tension, and then you can re-stretch. You have to allow your audience or your players or the people reading the campaign ready to run it, you got to allow them to understand that you have to allow these times for that tension to relax so that you can re-stretch it. If you pull the elastic band too hard and you snap it, then nothing's scary, there's no tension and there's no suspense. You've got to be able to play the elastic band game where you can, well, I know they're playing the game because they want to invest in that horror mystery, but manipulate your audience, your players, because it's part of the game, and that's what you're doing as the keeper or the storyteller, as the game master. You are creating that scene, you're creating that sensation of tension and suspense for them to explore. And then, as you said, David, the question was, do you allow them to relax? Absolutely, because otherwise, when you re-stretch the elastic band, there's nothing there, or you've limited on how much you can stretch your players. So it's about giving them those opportunities to relax and then come back in and relax and come back in. And I think with all of the horror genre tabletop role-playing games, if you have characters that continually go through that process, it's brilliant, because then what you get is a character arc, because they're re-experiencing these things. So you allow the player to benefit from that experience too.
And I think also, as Rachel said, there is a point to using different locations to have different modes, a different atmosphere, but also in each location, you need to have some kind of story arc with tension and less tension, with some investigation. So you don't, otherwise I think you get quite a stereotypical stories if you say, now we're in the dark cellar setting. Here, everything is horrific and violent and there's blood everywhere. And then we go to the cozy city setting with a totally different atmosphere. That can get kind of synthetic. get too stereotypical. You need to have a kind of a different kind of modes in each setting, I think, and use sound dramaturgical tools for each little session to make it a whole story, beginning and end, and think about it at the start of each session. And I think that's the trouble with writing long campaigns, because you don't really know where the game master will cut off. So you don't really know how these sessions will play out. You got to give them the pieces to play with to make a functioning session or story for each play.
And you also have to remember that the players never ever do what you expected them to do. So I've been in campaigns where I basically started giving up on pre-planning that much. I have in place what's going to happen from the outside. I know the basic story. I just move things around. If they go to the wrong place looking for the information, let them find the information in the wrong place. If they start messing up with the police, all right, maybe the police are cultists too. So basically, players fuck up everything you planned, so be prepared for that. And it happens a lot in a campaign, and that makes it more difficult. In a short session, or a convention or something, it really doesn't matter. But you're actually playing something like Horror on the Orient Express, and the player characters decide to bomb the train in session 1. What do you do after that? I mean, I actually heard that suggestion. Let's bomb the train.
Don't bomb the train?
Yeah. But what do you do if they actually do it?
Yeah, there's some ideas there I think we can come back to about dealing with players in campaigns versus dealing with players in one-shots. We'll come back to that later.
Also, if I could sort of like ladder onto what Michael just said, like about minimal planning, I agree, because players always surprise me where I'm like, all right, well, here's the problem. Here's what I think they're going to do. They never do that. So my game scripts are now just, here's the problem. Here's the NPCs who know about the problem. Here are 3 ways to solve it. And they never, ever pick one of the options that I come up with. But because I have them, when they come up with whatever shenanigans or insanity I'm going to be like, all right, well, they're taking a little from that solution and a little from that solution. So this is what I'm going to make them do so they can achieve their end.
John?
No, I was going to jump on this idea of the character arcs and maybe help translate some of those dramatic terms into TTRPGs. Because I was thinking effectively what we're meaning when we're talking about campaigns, we're talking about character arcs, is the player character will undergo something which changes them in some way. It might change them physically. It might change their outlook. They might now know something they never knew before. And then that time when the elastic band relaxes is when they have to sit and deal with the real world, knowing the things they know or having been changed in the way they've changed. And then you have an element of recovery and an element of this is the new normal. I now believe in magic. I now know Cthulhu exists. I've now been inundated into this cult. I've now sworn a blood oath. I've now dealt with losing my arm. And then they go back into the horror. And so when we're talking about character arcs, we're talking about the process in which a character is changed. And that's one of the more interesting things about campaigns. You can go through that again and again and again. And the person you end up with at the end of the campaign is so different from the person that you started with. And it's that journey that's really satisfying to take them on.
Yeah. I think that is a real key thing I find when I run campaigns is you start off with a character who has this backstory, this idea. Players have these backstories and ideas and how they think their characters are going to go. In a one-shot, it's less important because then they just go off and do whatever the players want to do because players are players. But as you get through like a campaign, you'll see that character goes from this weird concept on a page to becoming almost like a real person, depending upon the story. But I think Michael really hit on a good point there about about planning sessions, and Rachel kind of continued it, because players will be players, dice will be dice, things will not go to plan. So how do you approach planning we'll start off with one shots. How do you approach planning a one shot? And then after that, we'll come to kind of the difference in the approach to planning a campaign. So what are your approaches to planning a 4-hour con one shot? What are your thought processes? Gunilla, we'll start over there if you've got any ideas.
I usually do a lot of planning for one shots. A few days back, we played one shot for this spring's Gothenburg convention in Sweden, and I read, of course, we wrote the scenario and then read it through a couple of times, read through the pre-planned characters. I think that's very, very important. If you have pre-planned characters, you got to know them very well for a one shot. And since it's so short and the timing and the beat is so important in a one shot, you really got to have it all internalized, almost like if you're putting on a play on stage. It's different in a campaign where you improvise more, you wing it, it's a bit slower. But I think in a one shot, you really need to be better and have a more feel for the beat, and where will I put in the horrific parts, and how could I challenge the characters in different ways and give them each time in the spotlight. All those things get more important when you have a limited time to work with, I think.
May I add to that very quickly? There's also this very interesting part of doing a convention scenario. You get to play the same scenario perhaps 4 or 5 times, and each time is different. And each time you learn something new. So planning is important, but you have really, I usually just put the entire paper, the amount of the scenario, just put the scenario on the side and start improvising after a while, because you can't really get an idea of what the player is actually going to do.
It's often said that a lot of really, really good movie directors are made through horror. And the reason a lot of really, really good movie directors are made through horror is because it demands a certain attention to pacing and the beats and all of these different aspects in order to actually evoke feeling. And so it's like role-playing on hard modes to tell horror stories. You actually have to really pay attention to how the other people at the table are feeling. You have to actually pay attention to the story in a way that you maybe don't have to so much in other genres. And it's challenging, and I really like that about it. So when Gunilla was talking about all those ideas of pacing, and when you're talking about running something 4 or 5 times, all of that stuff is really challenging as a GM as well, which makes for getting much better at it and telling better stories, in my opinion. So it's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of the genre.
I think even just, David, you said earlier at the start about like for you running games, timing games within that kind of one-shot convention scenario thing. And I think we've all felt that, because that is, you know the scenario, you know the beats, you know what's going to happen, and obviously certain things need to land. And sometimes there can be these kind of, you're looking at these sandboxy elements or railroading elements rather than taking them out of the sandbox, because what you're trying to do is there is something to experience. Obviously the players will find their way through that in the way that they and the dice dictate. But Gunilla was saying at the start about planning, looking at it a couple of days before. One of the key things for me, I think, is like you, David, where I think about the timing of the scenario, and I actually think, right, well, if I've got 4 hours and I want to make sure that they've got time to explore these key features, these key plot points, these big story things, it'd be great if they talk about bombing the train, But if they spend an hour doing that, they're not going to get to do X, Y, and Z. So there are things there where I will have a scenario and I will kind of have a very rough guide. And obviously in the moment you are organically interacting with it. But by hour 1, I would like them to be roughly around here. By hour 2, I really want this. By hour 3 here, and then we've got this time to kind of play with the finale, the big climax, whatever's going on. And I think that's a really good way to look at it, to look at how you transition from scenes. Think about some of those ways that with a one shot that you can actually speed up elements of your gameplay. So when characters are saying, right, well, we're going from this location to this location, it's like, okay, great, we're there. Rather than, what vehicle do you take? Do you want to grab a coffee on the way? What are we, do we get train, bike, scooter? We're looking at some of those things that can help players as well, because in a convention, you don't know what kind of players you're getting as well. So being able to support them in maintaining that pace and narrative, I think is really important to building everything atmospherically that Hedge has just talked about. To maintain that, to almost protect that as you go through the story, is really important for the investment of everyone.
I think you also hit on
Smash cut.
I also think you hit on a key point, especially for things like con games. If it's friendly, you can obviously be a little bit more lenient. But for con games, Railroad, if control the story because you have that specific limited time. You are the GM. It is your story to tell. Control it. It's almost like being a moderator on a panel, and you have to get your people to answer and stay on time for the time limit we have. A little bit, but don't be afraid if you know you've got only 4 hours to run this game, to cut people off and make them do stuff. Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, well, I mean, so in my experience, like the players will meet you halfway, if they're good players. Because when I ran a game earlier today, one of my players just sort of straight up asked me, like, "Hey, we've only got like half an hour left for this game. Should I start revealing my character's secrets?" And I'm like, "Play as feels authentic to you," because also, for me, I feel like the best way to sort of keep everything on track is, the really great horror conventions of you can't leave until you solve the problem. So you're here in the abandoned castle, in the haunted house, or in the case of a vampire game, if you don't solve the problem, you have to leave. You get kicked out of the city.
And I also think, like you say, Rachel, that you have to let the players lead somewhat in order not to railroad too much. If they find a solution which is totally contrary to the scenario, but still makes sense to them, fine. Then let them go with it, because you need to let them keep the speed up. Otherwise, you will get bogged down, and you need to keep the beat is more important than that your logic trumps theirs.
In the one shot I was running earlier today, I ended up telling the players, like, okay, well, defecting to the Sabbat is a solution that you can take that will definitely bring the story to a conclusion. But they all sort of picked up the narrative hooks where I'm like, oh, please don't make me improv a whole Sabbat scene for the last hour of this game.
Yeah, there's things there, I think, as you say, you can give them the options, but there's also subtle hints that you can drop into games like, yes, you can go down that road, but please don't make me do it. But it's always let them have the option.
Very good and picked up on that.
Yeah. John, I see you.
Hold on. I lost track there. Yes, really good. When you are trying to run convention games, a really good model for your scenario is to have the ripcord that you can pull. And in horror, that tends to be the monster reveal in some manner, which can happen pretty much whenever. So I have a horror scenario that I wrote. In effect, you're going to go see Granny in the woods, and there's a big bad wolf. You already know most of the story. So they go into the woods, and I know that the the main scene involving Granny turning out to be an evil eldritch monster takes about an hour. So when you are about an hour from the end of your campaign, you know that that's the point at which you do the big reveal. And it's really helpful because it gives players an awful lot more of a feeling of sandbox in the first part of the scenario, because they can run around, they can go wherever they want, and you don't feel the need to put them on such tight railroads, knowing that when you do the reveal, they're on the railroad, you're going to the climax, and depending on what they've discovered, it might be easier or harder for them, but you kind of have a much more control of your time. And I think those scenarios where there is that ability to just go, and here's the monster, and here's the moment, is an exceptionally easy way to tell horror stories in your convention style.
So I tend to think of one-shots as like a map. You start off maybe in one place, your beginning of the story, your starting place, you're going on a journey. You've got your start and you've got your end point. That route between those two places, if you just take a road map, there are thousands of different routes that you can take to get from A to B. But as long as you know where you're starting and where you're ending, your players will take one of those routes. If you design your scenario well enough, it doesn't really matter which route the players will go on, because you will know that halfway through this thing will happen. It can be this road stop, it can be this roundabout. Things will happen. TA?
I just listening to what you were saying there, and Hedge, you mentioned about like that reveal and kind of giving it time and allowing it to happen. I've always kind of thought of the reveal in two different ways, and it is about a one shot on a campaign. In the one shot, and obviously there's some superior writers in my very near vicinity here that will have much more experience with this, but the reality of in a one shot, especially this convention games, Rachel also talked about kind of like different players and different players' experiences and abilities at the table. With a one shot, when you have those reveals, they are wonderful because you can just drop them as the GM and they're there for everyone to experience. With a campaign, you have the opportunity for the players to uncover the reveal themselves because you have that longer experiential time rather than going bang, that happens. And I think that's also another example of the uniquely different style of writing from a campaign to a one shot. It could happen in a one shot, but I think it would have to be like a core mechanic within the game, and you'd have to have a lot of those quick backup reserve ripcord pull the shoot moments if the players didn't get the reveal in a one shot, so that you could drop it to them, which would be a really successful way of doing it. But I love the idea that one shot, you're at the table, the GM can just kind of go, this happens, and that's a big moment for everybody at the table or an individual player character. But with a campaign, you've got the ability to let them find those reveals for themselves, which sometimes can have a much bigger impact on the character and the player.
You bring up campaigns nicely there, and we shall move over to that idea of planning a campaign. So we've talked about kind of how we plan a one shot being a kind of structured. We have these key points and beats that happen. Despite players doing what they want to do, we put in certain key events that will trigger things. But what about a campaign where you have weeks, months, years to do things, and if players go off and do what players do, the best laid plans of mice and men, as Michael was saying, he doesn't tend to plan much and allows a lot more freedom within it. Does everybody else do the same thing, or do you more plan things a lot better? What are people's different ways of planning a campaign? Do you plan a campaign, or you just let the players do what they want to do and see where it goes?
This is really fun for me because I'm doing this right now. I'm playtesting a campaign. So everything you're saying to me, I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing? What I'm doing right now is I kind of have moments within each campaign that are reveals that reveal a part of the overall structure and don't necessarily make sense each piece, but as they begin to put the pieces together, hopefully the whole thing will be revealed over a longer period of time. And so in that way, we still get investigative phases. We still get build-up of tension. We still get dangerous moments. We still get horrifying visitors revealed, except where possible, these aren't so deadly, so that we can release that elastic band tension, come back to normal, having gained a new insight, having seen something that has changed the way they do the world, but doesn't necessarily reveal everything. So there's definitely almost like an episodic style. So you're just taking your one-shot structure and repeating it with some modification to kind of give that episodic feel to your story, which I think is definitely the simple way in order to structure these things.
But if you want a more complex structure in your campaign, storytelling-wise, then I think when, for instance, we made wrote our Swedish Call of Cthulhu scenario, the King 7 Minotaur, and now Mike and I are making a cult scenario in Berlin, which is quite complex. Then you have to have a lot of stop points where before you start test playing, where we know where we're going in the whole campaign. We know where we're going in this part. We know how this part will tie into that part. And you can't plan everything before test playing, but I think you got to have the structure right. Or you will have to test play 5 times, and for a big campaign, face it, that's not possible. So the test playing demands that you do quite a lot of work beforehand. And I think also if you play for your friends, that is a good thing to have quite a lot of the ending at the far end, but have ideas about all the acts beforehand. Otherwise, it gets structurally sort of flimsy and tend to, as many, especially fantasy campaigns do, sort of run out of steam after a while.
We tend to, we do a lot of research. We research very, very much before we actually start writing a campaign or even a scenario. But you also have to remember the dramatic structure. In a one-shot, you also have the classical film concept of 3 acts. You have the build-up in Act 1, you have the deepening of the plot in Act 2, and you have the final solution or the final fight or the final reveal in the 3rd act. The problem with a huge campaign is that you have perhaps 10 parts. Each one of these parts also have to have the same dramatical structure. And the total of all the 10 parts or 12 parts also have to have this dramatical structure. So it's a structure within a structure, it's a complexity within a complexity, a larger complexity. And I didn't mean that I did not prepare before running a scenario campaign. I prepare a lot. I'm just not using all of that to prepare myself what the players are going to do. I know what I'm going to do. I know exactly what the situation is, how other people react. I just change my idea of the story or the written story if it's a board campaign to what the players are doing. So they get the maximum enjoyment out of this.
Yeah, there's that idea as well, isn't there? That, when you've got the campaign, whether it's something that you've written and researched, whether it's a bought campaign and you're running that and you're planning how to run that, you've got the material that's in the book. I mean, obviously, if you've written it, you might have some other, but then that's a slight advantage. But you've got the book, you've got the structure, you've got the NPCs, you've got the locations, you've got the clues, you've got the interactions, you've got the mind-bending horror investigation. You've got all of that to play with, and obviously the preparation is making sure that you know that and you're aware of that and how and when you can bring it into your players' actions and decisions and dice rolls. But the significant thing that we've all kind of mentioned, but is also probably one of the, in a campaign, I think the absolute best thing and the most enjoyment for me is the players, the characters or players, investigators, interactions and relationships that they build with each other as they go through. So the 2 things on that to bring up: one if you do have people that can't make sessions, it becomes very difficult if you've really invested in that because of the relationships of characters. Whereas you've got the scenario, you've got the campaign, the story will always be there because you've got that. So whoever can turn up can play that. But to get that real investment and care about each other's characters, which I suppose we want because we are playing horror, and this is a horror con. We're looking at that idea of that fear for each other's characters, that investment of each other's characters, that development, the elastic band, the downtime, the relationships that are built, that stuff that you can begin to plan for, but it's just loose ideas. Like Michael's saying, there's an epic amount of planning that goes into it, but things like that, you have to be able to react to it in the moment, organically, live. You have to be able to allow the players to create that. But the lovely thing is that if they do the hard work creating all those relationships and you've got the structure, you can then go, aha, that little thing, I'm going to hook that. That's going to become something that we really kind of explore later on with this part of the scenario. So it's having that relationship of, I've done my planning, I've got the scenario, I've got the campaign beat, say, let's say for this section, because again, echoing other people's words, planning the whole thing outright is lunacy with a huge campaign. Knowing it is important, knowing the story and where it's going, and perhaps those moments where we need those railroading moments and the moments where we can go sandboxy and open, super important. But knowing the current plot thread or beat or location or chapter, that's where I think the sanity for the game master comes in, because you can focus on that area, and then you can start building into the other one as you get a bit closer.
Yeah, to sort of ladder onto that, I think what makes a campaign really different is you can add personal plot. So you can make it really, really personal to the PCs, where you're like, oh, hey, here's your long lost cousin. And you give the player a couple scenes where you get to hang out and bond, and then be like, oh, and by the way, if you don't defeat the final monster, your cousin's gonna die. Or, this is your inheritance, or, this is why the campaign matters to you. And so again, like, one player can't make it for that particular session. That's fine. Let's focus on another player, someone who can make it, and let's do like some flashbacks or some side quests and really drive home why this matters to this character. Because in my experience, also because I've run a lot of LARPs before, live action role play. And especially for like years spanning campaigns where it's like, okay, well, we've got this great cosmic invasion, which I care about because it's a cosmic invasion, but why do I care? Well, because the rest of your family is part of the cult that is bringing them over, so, maybe get them to stop. And now the player has something to do and they're invested, and they really want to know how the story turns out, because they want to know not just how the story turns out on the macro level, but what does this mean for my character? And that makes it really personal and helps them get more invested, which, especially for horror, is so important.
And also, of course, the moment where you create the characters and hopefully have some kind of session series, especially for a campaign. I think the reason I could run a Pendragon campaign for so long was because the characters were so invested in the world. They were part of the world. They were almost like spirits or demigods of the worlds. They were mythological creatures of the world, and that made it easier. And also in horror, if you make a tight group of player characters that have a deep meaning for the plot, then they will find a meaning. The players will find a meaning in exploring this plot together, and thus exploring their characters' past and future and relations. So I think the characters are key to getting the thing moving and developing the plot.
I think we've all hit on that there. That here, in specifically in horror, it's the personal stories that make a campaign probably more impactful, especially for me. Yes, you have your overarching story that can go from whatever it is, hunting the big cult or the cartels or whatever. But it's as Rachel and Gunilla were saying, it's the investment the players have in actually solving that. In a one shot, the investment is that quick, fun enjoyment of we're going to go kill a big monster or we're going to go solve this mystery, and it's one shot, it's done, it's over. It was good fun. But to keep a campaign alive and flowing, you have to have, and I feel specifically within horror, you have to have interpersonal relationships with the characters. One thing you'll find in a lot of horror RPG books is relationship maps. You define kind of the relationship between the players, and then they have their touchstones and relationships outside of the main group. And using these to build the story and the investment in the long story, I think is quite key. And this comes again back to the wonderful elastic band analogy. You build that tension up and tension up and tension up. And as one of their touchstones or family members is getting into trouble, and then you relax it down as you realize, actually, no, it's just a normal everyday life. They've gone off and they've had maybe Thanksgiving dinner with their family, and everything's actually pretty cool and pretty chill for a little bit. So the tension doesn't always have to be the horror. It can be dealing with games like Things from the Flood and Tales from the Loop deal with interpersonal family issues quite well, because the tension mostly within those games is real life. I'm a 10-year-old kid and I've got to go home and do my homework. God damn it, why? I don't want to do my homework, and that creates a different kind of tension, and it's sometimes quite fun to play in longer games.
Also, kind of to build off what you said, like, as a storyteller, some of my best moments, I have done nothing for 10 minutes because my players are all so invested. They're all completely in character, and they're just spending that 10 minutes in character role-playing with each other, trying to figure out, okay, here's what's at stake, what do we do? And letting their character come out. I don't have to do anything. Like all the work I did ahead of time, it's paying off right now. I just get to watch, and that's great.
Yeah, I think we were saying that yesterday as well, Hedge, weren't we? Like the best moments in the game where you could, as a storyteller, you get to sit back like 20 minutes and just let the story happen.
Yeah, like you just have to make sure that like they're not sort of like running around in circles and like saying the same thing over and over again. That's obviously when you'd want to step in, but as long as they're building the scene together, no, that's great.
I have famously said to Newman more than once, do you actually want some plot or are you okay? And he has continued to just randomly talk crap with the other players in the game.
Bizarrely in a one-to-one game as well for 4 hours straight. jokes.
And I think there you are greatly helped if you have some kind of thematic clues from the beginning. Everybody is on board with what's the theme of this play, of this game. Like we did the test play now some days ago. The theme was bullying, and everybody knows this is about our teenage years, and it's about bullying because we all have the same dark secret. We bullied a guy and now he's dead and we feel bad about it. So everybody is focused on this is what this story will be about. And then they know how will we interact, how will we start to play, and they can lead the way through the story. And I think that's valid for campaigns as well, or maybe even more, because you can get derailed if you sort of try to change the theme or what it's really all about, and then the end game won't matter that much if you've changed the meaning of the story halfway. So I think to keep everybody somehow on the same page, this is what this story is about. That's a good thing.
I think we've talked about it a little bit. The session zero concept. Obviously, We've talked about it in other panels. What do you do for a session 0? What are the things that so we're obviously now talking about the campaign, not one shot. If you're doing a session 0 for a one shot, then it's a 2-shot because you've got 2 sessions going. But in your session 0, what kind of things do you do for your players and kind of ideas you lead forward with it? Yeah, Newman.
So I think Gunnilla's just said it really. The part of the answer that I'd like to provide is when you're doing that session 0 is talking about those kind of thematic aspects, so that especially with the campaign, because you don't want to create an investigator or a character or whatever, and then they not align with this longer arching narrative. You don't want them to be in conflict with what's going on. I mean, they could be in conflict, that could be great, but I mean conflict with the game rather than the internal workings of the campaign. That's fine. That's brilliant. So I remember back when we first did the Culpability, which is a Regency Call of Cthulhu campaign book, and that was very much luckily the players, they were all big Regency fans, they're all big Call of Cthulhu players as well, but just having those conversations and informing them, one of the key concepts of the entire campaign, because of the setting, is going to be about class. It's going to be about class warfare. It's going to be about status, and it's going to be about family. So the idea of the book is that they play a family, whether they're close or not, and then very much that Pride and Prejudice, Bennett family kind of style, but within Call of Cthulhu. And the idea is that they had to invest in that idea in session 0. And it was a how do we invest in this idea, should I say? So then the players were able to kind of go, right, well, I'd like to be this part of the family. I want to kind of face the gender roles, or I want to face the expectation of parental pressures, or I want to face the how do you the prospect of marriage. And that was before we even started getting into what the horror aspects of it could. So that allowed us to really invest in the world that the game was set in, so that everybody was comfortable, everybody was really kind of knew the expectations of that. And because they were bringing quite a lot to the table, I was quite lucky as well that they were able to provide as we went forward, but they could see that in each other. So everybody kind of had that safe footing with each other, as well as me as the keeper, which was a really lovely way to do it. So yeah, I think thematically it's important for the players to understand, especially with a campaign, what they're going to be getting into, which I think if you see a campaign book in a shop, if you're not the keeper, you might have a quick look at it. Obviously, don't go into it because that's what the keeper or the game master or the storyteller is going to use. But you should get a sense of the themes of the campaign and go, oh, I'd like to play in that. And that's kind of the idea of making sure that everybody is, they're all facing the same direction when you start.
I was actually thinking about this. Sorry, you go, Rachel.
This is why I like running Old World of Darkness, because they've got a great merit and flaw system. So I've got my campaign outlined in my head. I know roughly what it's going to be about. I've communicated that to my players, and now they have created their characters and handed them over to me, and I get to look at their merits and flaws, and I can see what's important to them, even the oh no, don't. So if one of my players puts the flaw thirst for innocence on their character sheet, they're gonna want me to throw a couple of innocents across their path so they can play that out. And so that's a really good hook for me to take from the session 0 as I, as I was sort of saying earlier, make it personal, build on personal plot. Here's why it matters. Okay, you have thirst for innocence on your sheet. You put it on there for a reason, because you want to play around with this concept. So I'm going to figure out a way to put the innocence in your pathway, and then also find a way to tie it into the overarching campaign.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good thing, which if we have time, we can come back to on those personal problems in campaigns versus personal problems in one shots, because games like this, and you have your dark secret and stuff. But we can come back to that in a bit. And I think, John, you were itching to say something.
I was thinking about this today, actually, because I'm presently thinking through my own campaign as we sit here talking about campaigns. It's a very lovely experience. And one thing I realized about the campaign I'm running right now is that how important premises are, because the premise of my campaign is that the player characters are all private detectives. And I actually had to stop running and kind of talk to them and say, hey, you're actually all really good at your jobs and you all feel really confident that you can solve things. Because I hadn't really explained that to them at that point in time. And they all thought they were a bunch of useless idiots running around like headless chickens. And so I actually kind of went, oh, interesting. So it's such a minor thing as having played quite a lot of Call of Cthulhu and being used to slightly less competent characters meant that they were primed for that. And so learning how premises work and learning what information to feed to your players so they can get in the right headspace is an incredibly important part of running a campaign, because they have to get in character. And so it was really interesting to me talking about session zeros and premises, how important it is to kind of get the players in the right headspace to do what the campaign expects them to do, which is to solve some epic quest or whatever that might be. I don't know if I'm making much sense, but it's turning thoughts in here. So hopefully it produces some discussion.
Yeah, cool. Michael, any thoughts?
Well, basically, I think the session zero also depends upon how well do you know your players. For example, we've been playing with the same group in Södertälje in the southern part of Stockholm for almost 30 years. So we know each other very, very well. So our session zeros are mostly about making sure that we have the talent we need for the scenario, that the players understand what kind of scenario this is, and also what connections do these player characters have to the other players and to the world itself. For example, we're starting up with the Star Trek campaign. I started some couple of months ago. We had our session zero. We decided what positions we should have on the starship, because they are starship crew, of course, in Star Trek. And we also ran through the Kosovo Maru scenario with them. How did they react? What did they do? What was their solution to this impossible position? So with new players who haven't played with that much, it might be a very different experience as well. We really don't, when you play one-shot scenarios on the convention, you really don't get to have a session zero. So I guess, even though I've been playing role-playing games since the early 1980s, I haven't had that many session zeros with unknown players. So we're going to have one in a few months at time. Gunilla and I are starting up a new group with Cult Divinity Lost. So it's be interesting to see how we solve that. But actually, my experience is a bit limited here, since we usually play with players with people we've known for years, decades.
Cool. There was a question that I saw in the chat a bit ago. It kind of disappeared now as Tom has turned up. But I think this is probably an easy question to answer. What would you recommend to first-time horror GMs? A one-shot or a campaign?
One shot.
One shot,
yeah.
5 campaigns back to back.
A one-shot
At the same
become a
time.
campaign. I mean, we played a one-shot last week, and I asked the players, what do you want to go on with? And one of the players said, shouldn't we go on with these characters who were then deeply traumatized and very special? I want to go on with these characters. So start out with a one shot, and maybe it will morph into something bigger.
Start with a short scenario, perhaps. See if you like this, if this works out fine for you. And don't get sad if everything fucks up for you. It does. It still does for us after 40 years of role-playing. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Bad luck, bad timing. Go back to it again. It's a wonderful hobby to have. So don't give up. Keep on pressing and start with easy scenarios in a game system you like. I would always recommend Dragonbane if you like fantasy. And if you like horror, let's go for Call of Cthulhu, of course.
Or Väsen. It's
Yeah,
very
Väsen.
simple. Everybody likes it. It's a monster investigating atmospheric game.
Because I think John mentioned earlier, a lot of good directors got their start in horror because horror teaches you really well about proper pacing and timing and all of those elements. And if you're on a one shot, that's all very condensed. And there's much less of a risk that things will get out of hand if you try to run a campaign. And so you start with the one shots, and so you can master the horror skills of pacing and building that rubber band tension. And once you figure out how to do that in a one shot, you can then translate that skills to a campaign in a way that just doesn't work the other way around. Unless it's a trial by fire, just don't do that to yourself.
One of the places I hang out is on the Call of Cthulhu Reddit. And it's a very funny place sometimes because it's very common for people to turn up in the community, and the first thing they do is they run The Haunting or The Edge of Darkness, or one of the introductory scenarios, and then they immediately try and run Masks. And then a few sessions later, they're never playing horror role-playing ever again. These are giant commitments, and they're difficult, and they're soul-consuming, they're life-consuming, as Michael said earlier. Don't step into them lightly. Treat them with the respect they deserve, and then they can be amazing.
I started out my game master career with Shadows of Yog-Sothoth, and then I did Masks. I'm still here, so do whatever you like.
I think the key is do start off with a one shot. If you and your players really enjoyed it, maybe then do another shot with the same characters and see if it builds up. We all have our own styles of play, our own styles of games that we like, and we'll fit into things. I personally love things like this and personal horror over things which are more rules heavy and math hammer. He says, although he's about to run a Warhammer game after this.
Yeah, well, so the other thing is also kind of that is someone who's coming new to horror has probably been introduced to the hobby by the 800-pound gorilla who shall not be named, but you can do horror, I guess. There's Vecna, that's horror, right? But and so doing a one shot will sort of help everybody who's got experience with the fantasy hack and slash to understand, this is the way in which this game is different. And so when it comes time for the big campaign, you're better familiar and you're better able to be, here's how I'm going to run it. And your players, I'm not going to try and you be the DPS and I'll be the meat shield. You know how to more accurately balance your party. Where it's
the
more like
librarian and I'll be the investigator.
Yeah, you speak Latin, I'll be the investigator.
And also, maybe more important than the length of the scenario, ask your players what they feel comfortable with. If they think that the 1920s is a faraway, strange country they don't want to meet, don't go there with Call of Cthulhu. Then play something present time. If they are more interested in, if they like escape room games, maybe you make a small scenario with that setting. If they want to just sit and talk and do sandboxy research, then you make that kind of scenario. Try to figure out what do they want, what are they comfortable with, especially if they're newbies as well.
I think that's a really important part, and I know everybody's touched on it, but just that idea of, if you are going to be doing this, testing the waters with a one shot for you to vibe your style, your preparation of it, everything that we've talked about throughout this whole recording, seeing how you kind of use your plans that you make. Do you find that you overplan, underplan? It's probably a good thing to work out before you attempt a campaign, because otherwise you could just dedicate a good proportion of your life to something that might not be as rewarded as you think in terms of the investment. And also for the players, do they enjoy it before you fall into a campaign? It's doing that one shot, you might come out of it and everyone goes, okay, this is it, this is what role playing is about, this has been amazing, we love it, there's the open door. Or if you do it and everyone goes, oh, I quite like being the tank, or I quite like being the DPS. It's knowing your group and your players as well. Obviously there are other options out there in the world to find other people to play with as well, and keep those other games going. But I think that sound advice is maybe if you are coming at it completely fresh, if you've got experience, go for it, or do what your heart tells you. But I think sound advice for anybody would be maybe give a one shot a go, because you might learn a bit about yourself in terms of playing it as well.
I think as well, there's something there that kind of came to my head as you were talking, John. Not John, Newman. You are the same person.
We are.
Was managing expectations, not just of yourself and your players, but kind of the campaign that you're going to do. If at any point the campaign starts to kind of feel maybe a little bit off, and like you can see people are not enjoying it, or you're feeling like you're not enjoying it, have a chat with your players, and start to manage those expectations. Like, are we really wanting this to be a 6-year campaign, or do we want to finish this in the next couple of weeks? Being open about campaigns and how long you want them to go on for, I think, can be quite key. Because you can go, oh yes, I've got this wonderful idea, and it's going to be a 2-year campaign, and it will lead you places, and it'll do this, and then like 6 weeks in, your player's like, so
I gotta go walk my goldfish.
yeah. Cool. One final question, I think. This probably could go on for some time, though. This final question. We've just talked about one shots and campaigns possibly leading from those one shots. Let's delve into that a little bit more. Say you do pick up a new game system, a new book. So you've just decided that, Cult Divinity Lost looks amazing, I want to play that. You play through one of the starter scenarios, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. Your players are like, yes, this is what we want. And then next session, you're like, we want to come back, use these same players and continue playing. How would you turn that one shot, maybe starter scenario, into a campaign? Because I found that this has happened to me quite a few times. I've gone, I'm going to run this for a group of people, this scenario for a group of people, because I know they'll like it. And they have done, and again, that we want to continue doing this. We want to keep these characters and continue going on. What do you do? And what are your thought processes of how you would go from that one shot into a campaign?
Build on the characters. That's my advice. That's the one shot was probably a one shot with a random theme, and maybe that's not the thematic narrative arc you would want in the campaign. But the characters, they like the characters, and the characters have dark secrets. They have personalities, they have family, they have friends, they have a world around them. Build around that and find a thematic hook in it, and find some kind of endpoint for the campaign from that hook. So you have an idea of a journey from here to there, and then they will lead you. That's my take.
For me, it would really depend on the system. So, like, if I ran a Call of Cthulhu one shot and most of the characters survived, and then like, can we do a campaign? Then I'm like, all right, so your good friend Jackson Elias, and continue from there. But if it's something like World of Darkness, then I might run like a fluff game or two. to buy me time in the background. I'm like, all right, we're going to flesh out like all the creepy crawlies in the city and the politics and who owes what to whom and why and all the problems that they can solve. And then also what Gunilla said was there's a reason that they really fell in love with these characters. And so pay attention to that. And as you build your campaign, keep that in mind and keep those reasons in mind and work that into your story structure.
There's the idea as well. You've done that first one shot, let's say, and they've really enjoyed it. Characters have survived, really engaged with it. There's the decision there, isn't there? Depending whether you're playing at friends at home, whatever, online, are you going to go and play an actual pre-made purchasable campaign, or are you going to continue a story that's an organic one, that's a development of your characters that you've done, let's say, at your home table? The idea there that you've got, and I think Hedge alluded to it earlier, or talked about this idea of the TV version of these, where we're looking at like a singular film, whether we're looking at a series. If we look at what happens in those film series or the TV series, what we're looking at is escalation, and that's not just in terms of the horror or the narrative or building to an overarching climax that the super objective of the villain or the monsters, whatever we're doing. What we're looking at there is it could be an escalation within tabletop role playing of the characters' experiences, the locations they get to go to, the interactions they get to have, and that is going to change throughout. And again, a little bit like our elastic band, they will grow, they will shrink, they will grow, they will shrink. But I think that's something to consider as well, moving into a campaign, is being forearmed, should we say, rather than forewarned, that if you're moving from a one shot to a campaign, there is going to be this expansion of whichever world you're in, whether that be 1920s London or whether it be, Florence, Camarilla, political machinations, or whether it be a twisted world of cult in an American suburban area that then turns into something else. You're going to look at that expansion of narrative. And I think that's something to be forearmed with as you go forward, which can be really exciting. That's not supposed to be daunting. It's actually a really exciting thing to look at as a keeper, and definitely as a player.
John, Michael, any thoughts?
Well, actually, for me, it would probably depend quite a lot on the game system. I mean, let's face it, it's much, much easier to continue a campaign from a one-shot if you play in Dragonbane or Dungeons & Dragons. You say, all right, next week we are going to Waterdeep. We're going to experience the largest city in the north of the Forgotten Realms. It's also quite easy if you're playing sci-fi. Say, we're now going to another planetary system with a new story. For Cult or Call of Cthulhu, it could be a bit more difficult, though. Or you could always use your gold friend Jason Elias just called and said he was in trouble, or you just got this old house from your old uncle you never knew you had. For Cult, it's actually a bit more difficult because I tend to ask my players to make characters fit for this scenario. So if you had a good session 0 with these characters playing, for example, the scenario Gunilla and I just made for Gotcon, the Swedish convention in next April, they would probably not work that well for a scenario The Black Madonna, because there's a difference in time. This is 10 or 15 years after The Black Madonna. You could change the time, but that you have to change the scenario quite a lot. And the play characters we made for this first scenario in Sweden are very much about feeling guilt for what they have done before. Of course, this is a common scenario in Cult, but it wouldn't probably work that well with The Black Madonna or with The Children of Darkness or any other of these scenarios. So it's a bit more difficult. I would probably go for making entire new scenarios for these specific characters. And I would tell my players, right, you want to do this, that's good. But do you have any ideas of how you want this to continue? What do you want to come out of this? How do you see the future of these characters? And make all of them give me some new ideas and thoughts. And then I would try to say, okay, let's wait a couple of 2 or 3 weeks before we start playing this again, because I have a lot of work to do. That's my take on it.
I think that's quite an important thing there, because games like Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, and Cult, your characters at the end of a scenario, a one shot, are probably either going to be dead or really, really messed up. And so having that continue then into a long scenario where you have to continue play this probably very, very damaged insane person issue in Cthulhu. These kind of characters tend not to, for me at least, feel like they would work for a long period of. So being open, maybe, and having that conversation, ask the players, like, do you really see that these characters can continue within a longer setting, and having that open conversation. And final thoughts, John, you got any Hedge? You got any thoughts on one shots to campaigns?
I was sort of staying out of it because I've never done it.
Okay.
It's not something that I'm keen on for most of the reasons Michael's already laid out. I'm sure people like doing it, but I would rather decide in advance and go forward with that. So I was just staying out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, it's always happened by accident. I've never planned to do it. Like, I finished a one shot. It's usually within the heroic fantasy genre where it's actually quite easy to do that, as Michael was saying. But I don't know if I've done it within horror settings, but within heroic fantasies, like, yeah, well done, you did this, right? Okay, here's your experience. We'll go to a different town where a goblin has been stealing stuff, and we'll deal with that, and then go from there. But cool. Okay, we shall do some final thoughts and wrap ups then. I think, as we are about an hour and a half in. So final thoughts, one shots versus campaigns. Does anybody have any final thoughts to or words of wisdom to put to our audience?
I have an incredibly underutilized Ko-Fi, which you can find at Ko-Fi Stolen Fires, because that's where I am on the internet. It is a worksheet to help people plan out a one-shot. And so it is essentially what is the main problem, what's the big twist, and helps people plan out the story beats. It's pay what you want on Ko-Fi. So get it for free.
Useful tool. Especially for
pay me $2.
Especially for first-time GMs, I think something like that is a really useful tool. Yeah, TAE.
I think so. One of the things that we do, Hedge and I, with the Miskatonic Playhouse, is that we broadcast a lot of actual plays, some of which are what you would say are one-shot scenarios. So sometimes we record these like in a live Twitch stream, and it could be up to 4 hours. Sometimes we have those scenarios that are one-shots, but then go on for 10 hours over a couple of days, and then they're kind of done in that way. We do actually have ongoing scenarios, or we have some full completed produced campaigns as well, such as Cult and Culpability, which is the Regency Call of Cthulhu long-running campaign. We're also working on Mr. Whisper, which is a Gaslight Cthulhu campaign.
Are we finishing Mr. Whisper?
With the release of the Gaslight book.
Newman.
It's all ready to go. We're just waiting.
Mr.
Yeah, it's there. It's all there. It's all there. We've got season 3 to record. Season 2 is coming out very soon. But if you wanted to, because this is how I learn, as a teacher, I'm very aware of my own learning styles. watching, listening. It's very much how I get into a system. As much as I love reading books and losing myself in them, I actually seeing it or listening to it really helps me. So the Miskatonic Playhouse can be a great resource for that. That's exactly what it was made for. Highlight people's works. If you like their things, you can kind of go out and get a copy yourself and run it. But also you can see what a one shot takes when someone runs it, and the players how they interact with it. And you can also see a campaign as well. So hopefully that'll be a resource for anybody here that's going, do you know what, I'd quite like to get a sense of what a campaign could look like or what a one shot could look like. So the Miskatonic Playhouse.
This is a quick comment on that. We talked about this in the keynote. A reminder, we're not all Matt Mercer. We don't all get paid. And so listening to actual plays, they are not, some will be really, really good and some are, but as GMs as well, we are not Matt Mercer. So make sure that you are aware of that when you run a game. You won't be doing these wonderful critical role things. But yeah, anyway, good.
Matt Mercer's first voice acting credit is in 1982. He was 6 years old and voiced Akira, or was a voice actor in Akira. So,
okay. Wow. You can also try to play some half-long scenarios. Actually, there are a lot of scenarios in three parts, in 4 parts. I mean, Masks is a terrible undertaking in its present incarnation, with a lot of stories around it, but a short one-off is often very demanding for beat and storytelling and narrative reasons. But play a 2-3 scenario story. That's the absolutely easiest thing you can do as a new game master, I'd say. You don't have to think so much about the beat, and you don't have to plan for half a year. And if people don't enjoy it, it's just 2 or 3 nights. So I'd say start out with that.
It also gives you an idea of kind of, are your players interested in playing a longer setting rather than just a quick one shot, one and done, and enjoy the moment and be done with it? Or do they want this kind of build up? Also allows you as a GM to practice those skills a little bit without that insane commitment that you could go through with a 12-year Pendragon. That's insane. Michael?
Well, this is for an advice for if you wanted to start it out, I would say choose the game system wisely, because there's a hell of a lot of difference trying to run Star Wars D6 or Eclipse Phase. I mean, Eclipse Phase is a wonderful game, but it is insanely complex. The background is insanely complex, good, but insanely complex. On the other hand, you can find Star Wars D6 free if you look around a bit, and it's a wonderful game system, very easily run, lots of scenarios. And in the same way, if you start playing fantasy, start with Dragonbane or, God forbid, Dungeons and Dragons. Stay away from Pathfinder, though. It's insanely complex these days. And also ask your players, what do they want to play? What kind of game? Make sure that you have a good connection with your players. So you don't want to go in the situation you started playing, for example, Dragonbane. Everybody said, oh, we wanted to play some horror games with a nice twist, with nice people doing nice things to each other. So ask your players, what do you actually really, really want to play? Not what you think is cool or good, or what you really want to play. Find a nice game, have this session 0, start out easily, and understand it's going to go badly in the start probably. Because you are not used to being game master. Your players might not be used to being players. They might not understand how to play. You have to teach yourself and them at the same time. They have a lot of influence on you. So take your time, don't get sad if everything goes wrong at the first 2 or 3 or 5 sessions. Give it time. It's a wonderful hobby to have, and it's well worth it when it finally starts to work.
Yep. And Hedge?
Would probably take a beat here to remind everyone listening that a lot of this isn't just dependent on what you like and what you want to run as a GM. It also depends on a lot of the realities around you. If you are able to have the great ability to play with the same group week in and week out and have a regular game, you're very lucky. A lot of people don't get that. And we talk about the campaigns as being really satisfying experiences because you get to go in these character arcs, and that's all very, very true, but it also relies on a lot of logistical things. It relies on being able to sit down with your friends every week. And that's actually really, really special. It's a beautiful thing to have, the ability to play with the same group over and over again. Newman and I are trying to assemble a group to play regularly with. We've been trying for years, and we've still not managed. It's busy people living their busy lives don't always get that. And so sometimes you're forced to just find a date and one night and just play through a single game because that's what you can actually achieve. And so what I just sort of maybe end with is if you can have these campaigns, these multi-session episodic things, or these huge masks and all the other types of big, big adventures, enjoy it, because you're not going to get that many of them in your life. I can promise you that. And they're really beautiful things to do.
Awesome. And on that wonderful note, we shall wrap up. So we're around again, everyone. Say who you are, where we can find you, anything you want to promote, and then we shall let Rachel go to sleep. And we'll go the opposite way on my screen this time. So we'll start with T A Newman.
Well, I have been T A Newman. I will continue to be T A Newman as well. Yeah, you can find me at the Miskatonic Playhouse, really, in all of our socials. I'm pretty active online when I'm not busy just lifing. And I've written a few scenarios which are available on Drive-Thru RPG, some of which are gold, specifically the Christmas one. And Christmas is coming up, so if you fancy playing a Christmas horror with your pals, Secret Santa, you can also engage in a bit of Secret Santa-ness, which is quite nice. Actually, if you get the chance, come and drop into the Playhouse, because we're a really friendly community, and we've got lots of areas where we talk about things like writing and what you want to do and how you're going to do it. So hopefully, if you're listening and you fancy a chat, jump in and come spend some time with us.
Rachel.
Hello, my name is Rachel. I'm very tired. I'm racing the sun to bed tonight. But no, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Stolen Fires pretty much everywhere on the internet, including my own Twitch channel, where I run a lot of small RPGs. We've got Parlors and Paragons running in 12 hours. It'll be great. And then I also have some writing up under my author name, Rachel E. Judd, up Miskatonic Repository and Storyteller's Vault. So I've got a couple one-shots, short shots. I've got Return to Teutoburg Forest up on the Miskatonic Repository that is Invictus Cthulhu. It is a shameless ripoff of Apocalypse Now. And then I also have St. Mormo's Home for Wayward Girls, which, if you've seen the Magdalene Laundries, shameless ripoff of that. Yeah, you can also find me Blue Sky as Stolen Fires. Love talking about RPGs. It has been such a delight to meet all of you. Yeah.
And Hedge.
I am John Hedge. I am the backstage manager over at the Miskatonic Playhouse. The big thing I want to talk about right now is that I am running writing groups for horror writers in 2026. If you're interested in joining a small group of 4 to 6 people of a similar level to you who are writing, come along to Miskatonic Playhouse, get involved, have a wee chat with us, and we will try and match you up with a small writing group. This is for anyone who wants to write regularly and just wants to have some people to do that with. Yeah.
Michael.
Oh, there. I thought Gunilla was before me, but different screens, I guess. Well, I'm Michael Petersen. I've been writing games together with my partner Gunilla since 1980. Oh my God, 82. We've written Mutant, we've written for Dragonbane, we've written for Cult Divinity Lost, Call of Cthulhu. We've written 3 horror novels published in Sweden. Well, you can find us on Facebook. If you see us actually in physical person, please come forth and talk to us. We love talking to other people. We are very friendly. We don't eat people at all. Yeah, please say hello if you see us.
And Gunilla.
Yeah, what Michael said. And right now we're working on a cult campaign set in Berlin with a Stasi theme, sort of, and troubleshooters, a Paris book. And we just finished a Lone Wolf campaign for the role-playing for Dragonbane, with Dragonbane rules, but for the role-playing game based on Joe Deaver's Lone Wolf solo adventures. So we do different stuff.
Ooh, excellent. And I have been David, your moderator. I am part of the Darker Days Radio podcast, where we talk about horror RPGs. Also a freelance writer. I've written for various games and have stuff up on Drive-Thru RPG, a lot in the Free League workshop, where I co-wrote the Modern Western setting with Tom, and I will be running that later today, I hope, if my players don't all disappear. So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed that panel. It's been great fun talking to you all, and hopefully we will be saying goodbye to everybody if David is around. So goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Voice in the void.